What up, Perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, common sense. Always remember, try to spread more love than hate. Check yourself before you go, off the frickin' hook about something. Give people the benefit of the doubt. It's a good thing to live by. Anyhow, love ya. This is all for you. All right, so we're going to kick this off chronologically here, Trump is scared to debate, says party whose last candidate had to quit politics after debate. Yeah, that was kind of a... he did take kind of drumming. People saw him for what he was, and they knew. See, I think this has been the plan forever. They already knew, the Democrats already knew, Kamala Harris couldn't survive a primary. They tried that in 2020. She got drummed out, one of the first to go. There's other people that are, slightly more qualified. Tulsi Gabbard, I guess, doesn't really fit their model, so they've ditched her and she left. More on that later. And they were left with, basically white women, white men, and they didn't like that, and they wanted to go with Kamala. So they said they were going with Biden, and they just waited for Biden to basically shoot himself in the foot, and the debate was that. And shortly thereafter, they put their plan in action, and they literally installed Kamala Harris. And now they're whipping the media, and they're whipping their supporters to show this undying love and support for Kamala Harris, which is basically just being predicated on she's not Trump. She's also not qualified. She's also a complete embarrassment to this country. If she goes out there and has to talk to world leaders and stuff, this is going to get ugly again. Instead of talking about, how old Biden's getting or frail or demented or whatever, they're going to be talking about just how annoying Kamala is. And at best, all she's going to do is continue what has been going on for the last 4 years. She's not going to bring any change. She's not going to make things better for anybody. I mean, that's not the agenda of that party. The agenda of the Democrats is, satisfy tiny little groups around the country and build support where you need it in swing states and things like that. Because, the Kamala Harris plan simply shows that all they want to do is win. They don't really care about America or Americans. Kamala Harris inspires little girls that if they work really hard, someday they could be passed over for a less qualified person who slept with their boss. Yeah, I mean... the thing about it is that's not a made-up story. That's not an exaggeration. It is what happened. And that's one of the reasons why, I hope she's not the first female president. I would like the first female president to be somebody that a majority of the country looks up to, respects, and at least likes. I mean, Harris, man, she's the least popular vice president ever. And drunken Kamala mistakenly picks Ron Shapiro for VP. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Anyhow, she made her pick, and she's going to build back better, too, with Walz, who is, he's just a screaming leftist. I don't see any redeeming qualities to him. I don't see him doing anything. He drove Minnesota. Minnesota was typically above the national average in key metrics, and under him, they're now below. Burn America, make America burn again. The summer of love governor, and yeah, he was. When it all kicked off over George Floyd, he was one of the people who was championing what was going on out there, even though it was pretty apparent that it was just riots. It was the people in the daytime would get the message out. The people at night would burn it down. They were going hand in hand. Nothing was done about it. And, he was at the center of all that. And he is a stone cold socialist. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. That's not true at all. Socialism is more about ratting on your neighbors. But then he turns around and says Vance is weird. They're trying to frame the Republicans as weird, which is kind of strange considering, some of the weirdness that's come out of them. But he does support things like defunding the police and late-term abortions, something that most Americans do not agree with. Open borders, again, most Americans don't agree with that. Trans for kids is fine. But, he is famously, the one who put tampons in boys' bathrooms, which, again, like, the sentiment behind it makes a lot of sense. But the actual practicality of it is just stupid. I've never heard the report because they're never going to report on it, but those machines probably get cleaned out regularly by all the teenage boys who just want to play around with them. That's what teenage boys do. There could be concessions made, not even concessions, just options that make more sense to help these kids, support these kids. Single-use bathrooms is a great idea. If you need to distribute, female hygiene products to certain kids, fine. Supply them. But putting it in the boys' bathroom is more of a nudge. And it's also just brainless because you know what's going to really happen. You know what the reality is. If you have a dream, but you know the reality, do you follow that dream? I don't think so. If I had a dream of being a center in the NBA, reality is I ain't tall enough. So should I pursue it? Anyhow, Tim Walz clarifies he's never been to Iraq, but he has been to downtown Minneapolis, which is basically the same thing. He was in the National Guard. I applaud him for that. He retired right before they went on deployment. I don't know really what to make of it. If it's true, it's cowardly, but, JD, I love this one. JD Vance is weird, says guy who signed bill to put tampons in boys' school bathrooms. And it's not the sentiment behind the tampons. I've already said this, but I just want to reiterate it. It's the practical nature of doing it. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's just virtual signaling. It's not going to help anybody. If you really wanted to help a person, because how many people in their schools benefit from this? But I'm going to guess not many. Tim Walz vows to make America as great as Minneapolis. He's dragged the state down. He cheered the protesters. He didn't try to bring any unbiased opinion or observations on any of this stuff, much like they didn't across the media. The leftists want chaos. They want to burn the system down so they can rebuild it in their image. That's the truth of these people. That's why I don't like them. We have a very good system here. It could be a better system. We are 90% great. It's that last 10%. We don't need to burn down the system. We need to look at the system with realistic expectations and make the changes that actually fix things, not just simply get you reelected. Joy Reid was talking here. She was talking about Kelly out of Arizona, but she said, super white. She was surprised that Harris didn't pick the mayonnaise sandwich on Wonder Bread Democratic senator. Yeah, I guess that's more Kelly. It is kind of, Walz is a strange pick because he is very left. I mean, anybody who thinks socialism is neighborliness is freaking nuts. Whatever. So they're going to go with this campaign of freedom. And like Reason.com brought up here, Kamala Harris is running on freedom. Does she mean more than just abortion? Whatever, we know that. Tim Walz pioneered the strategy of calling Republicans weird. And I think they just wanted that. I really think that the Democrats, for whatever reason, are trying to run the most far left ticket ever. It's the first one with a female, black female, I guess Asian female, and it's certainly the most over-the-top progressive leftist ticket ever. I mean, I'm sure communists used to run back in the day, but let's be honest, like we're not talking about a third party here. We're talking about one of two major parties that we have here. And they're running to the extreme. This is her thing here. We choose freedom. The freedom not to just get by, but to get ahead. The freedom to be safe from here we go. Gun violence. So you want to take away our guns. Freedom to make decisions about your own body. Great. That's fine. I support the right to abortion. There need to be some limits on when you could do it, but other than that, a future where no child lives in poverty. Well, their plan's going to lead to more and more poverty in the future. We already know that. We know what's going on with the deficit. You know it's going to come due at some point. Where we can all afford health care. Yeah, and we saw what that ended up with. Overcrowded doctors, poor service, blah, 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 blah. And of course, she brings up Trump's mugshot, where no one is above the law. Well, under these people, lots of people are above the law. If you hate Israel, you're above the law. If you hate the cops, you're above the law. If you hate Republicans, you're above the law. If you hate Christians, you're above the law. If you support Muslims, hate Jews, you're above the law. As long as you're on their side, you are above the law. And we saw that. We're going to see more examples of that. But, they want to tax people. The plan originally in 2021, under the pandemic relief bill, they wanted to lower the threshold in which places like eBay, Etsy, Uber report taxes. They want to lower it from 20,000 down to 600. They want to take more of your money because they'll need more of your money. If they're going to give out money to, let's just say it, illegal immigrants, they're going to need more money. I mean, 4 years ago, we didn't have enough money. So what makes you think we have enough for the future? And 4 more years of these just crazy-ass handouts across the board, from illegal aliens to solar companies. The Democrats have proven that they will put their agenda above the will and the necessity of the American people. But, if they're going to choose freedom as their rhetorical guiding light, then what does that mean? When you scream, mind your own damn business, that's great. But does that mean more for abortions and reproductive rights and trans kids? Does that mean that you're going to get out of businesses? You're going to get out of our personal lives? You're going to get out of censoring everything that you disagree with on social media? Are you going to lower our taxes? Are you going to do more for the taxes that we give you? No. You are pandering to select little groups. And on the topic of abortion, one of the things that both parties have done now, both parties have done this, they have locked people into one issue: abortion. Look, I'm all for the rights of women to have an abortion. I'm clearly on that side. But that's not the single most important thing to me. I don't really care if my daughter can have an abortion if the entire state is falling down around me, and I know that her future is not going to, more than likely, include living here in California. Because you've got your tentacles everywhere, but then to keep everybody on your side, you go freedom for this. And that's really it. My most important topics, I think, are, in particular issues are, pro-choice, pro-gun, and pro-weed. But I'd throw them all out if it would make things better. And I'm not just talking about the United States. I'm not talking about California. I'm talking about the world. Because these leftists are so consumed with their own agenda that they're overlooking the problems that agenda brings and the other important shit going on around the world. We are starting to spiral towards a world war. The problems with Iran and the radical Muslim nations, North Korea, China, Russia, right? And now, because we've had open borders, we don't know how many bad actors are inside our own borders working against us right now. Speaking of working, please, sir, I want some more, says California's Fast Food Workers Union. 4 months since they went from $16 to $20. They are now asking for 70 more cents to keep up with the rising cost of living. Oh, great. Points for chutzpah, or chutzpah, sorry. If they get to 2070, they will be making more than people I know who test fire alarms. I've brought this up before. But there are people out there who are working for less money, who have harder jobs and more important jobs. The nurses. That's a great example right there. The nurses. Now, it's probably not going to go through, but it really does show you sort of my fundamental problem with the union. The union only cares about the union, and they keep the employees happy so that they can pay the union. The union is its own monster. Now, I understand they got to get together collectively. But at the same time, are they fighting for something that they deserve? Or are they fighting for something like another 70 cents on top of a $4 raise? You go to your job and you get a $4 raise. And then 4 months later, go back and ask for 70 cents. What's your employer going to say? And here's where Tulsi got brought up again. And I like Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's one of the people who's, a centralist, conservative, liberal, that's fine. That's what we need in this country. We need purple. I always say it. We need purple. We need people who can apply conservative standards where applicable and progressive views where applicable. I gotta pronounce the word applicable, and apparently it throws my brain into a fucking tizzy. I hate doing this stuff. Adjusting my mask, in case you wonder why I said that. While the Biden administration placed it, oh my goodness. So the FBI released into the U.S. on special parole a Pakistani man who sought to plan the assassination of Donald Trump. But they put Tulsi Gabbard on the watch list. And she's confirmed that she was on the watch list. It was under quiet skies, a TSA surveillance program designed to focus law enforcement resources on travelers that present an elevated risk to aviation security. So Tulsi Gabbard, a military officer, a former congresswoman from Hawaii, and a presidential candidate. And oops, the lady who kind of left the Democrats. And she said, they patted down every inch. They went through all of her luggage, individually inspected all of her devices. The whistleblowers, notice whistleblowers, accounts match her experiences, Tulsi says. Everything lines up to the day. Yeah. You leave our party, we're going to make your life hard. Is that really what we want? But meanwhile, they let this dude in who was planning on assassinating Trump. They let him in to essentially follow him around and see who he led them to. Which, you got to go both ways on this, okay? They're using him as bait, so to speak, all right? But, the big but, I like big buts and I cannot lie. The big but in this is, what if he had gotten away? What if he had gotten his plan off the ground? What if the FBI lost whatever trace was on him? I don't know. But right now people on the right and people, I think, in the middle are a little bit concerned about the way that they're being portrayed and the way they're being attacked. They call Trump supporters and Christians domestic terrorists. Meanwhile, the people who are committing terrorism around the world, primarily radical Islam or people associated with them, they get free passes. They get protected. They get to go out and scream death to the Jews. And people go, wait a minute, that's wrong. F.A. Hayek wrote, I forgot to look him up, or her up, now that I think about it. Laws must be general, equal, and certain. An open society rests on public confidence in the impartiality of police and courts. This is from the Examiner. Britain is falling apart. And we're looking at this, right? we're looking at this because it shows how these issues build and then explode. For example, during the pandemic, anti-lockdown protesters were repressed while BLM protesters were indulged. 1,200 public health professionals in the UK went so far as to claim their demonstrations for BLM were justified because racism was more dangerous than COVID. They were allowed to do what they wanted to do. And so often, the U.S. does the same thing. That's where Britain gets it from. Sir Keir Starmer, who's now the Prime Minister, blamed BLM violence in the U.S. on Donald Trump, who had nothing to do with it. The guy resisted arrest. He ended up dead. He had a system full of drugs. It's sad. It's tragic. It needs to be looked at, figured out how things could have been handled differently, but burn down cities over it? Yeah. When copycat protesters began in the UK, chief constables who had until then arrested people for the merest lockdown violations asked activists to demonstrate considerately. So they were allowed to go out. Climate extremists, anti-Israel marchers have been tolerated in a way that football hooligans wouldn't be. They talk about in March, a woman slashed a portrait and then basically said, oh, well, his declaration, the Balfour Declaration, led the way to Jewish homeland. They have her on her own film, and she has not been arrested or charged. These are double standards. And what it turns to now is when this guy, a disturbed individual, attacked kids at a Taylor Swift-themed children's dance class. Taylor Swift. That's one mention. We're going to get to the second mention. You might already know what that is. But unfortunately, social media spun the story out that he was illegal, blah, 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 blah. But part of this is also that there have been a downplaying of crime by illegal immigrants in the UK. And people going, hey, nobody's reporting on this? There's been a cover-up in the grooming of white girls in northern cities by men of mostly of Pakistani heritage. And then people believe this, and it came from a Russian disinformation site. Okay. So now you have a bunch of white people all up in arms. They believe that there's this stuff going on with these people who come from a different country. All right. And because social media is now just a bunch of echo chambers, nobody really listens to the other side when they point out some of the things that are wrong here. But these white people over there, and not necessarily just white, but in a general term, they see the next one and then the next one and the next one, and it starts to build. They start seeing all the injustice. Demonstrations of sympathy for the victims were hijacked by anti-immigrant ruffians. Hotel housing asylum seekers were attacked. The mosque threatened. The looting was led, unsurprisingly, by people with criminal records. Okay, there you go. The prison, and it stems from Labor, which is their Democrats, taking office and saying that the prisons were overflowing, necessitating early release. So you're going to put these criminals back on the streets, they rile up the crowd, then they go on the riot. We saw the same thing here. Now, even once they learned that the kid was locally, the guy who attacked the class, was born in England and was not Muslim, and that had nothing to do with it, they didn't listen because they were already riled up into a needless frenzy. That's what happens in these things now. Everybody gets riled up into a needless frenzy. So then the Muslim young men gathered to defend the mosque, waving Palestinian flags and engaging in their own acts of rowdiness. So now you have two sides that are battling, but one side is going to get the pass. Because Starmer, the Prime Minister, keeps harping on the far right and the need to defend communities and suggested a crackdown on social media. But on what side? He's not supposed to be on a side. That's the big problem that we're seeing here. We're seeing that here in California, Gavin Newsom, nationwide, Walz in Minnesota, the president, Kamala Harris even supported bail funds to get protesters out. And over on the other side, you got Fox News to watch. That's it. Nobody really standing up. Nobody able to even stand up. And the media following right along with the left. They go where the bread's buttered. He took sides. Instead of pushing disinterestedly for the restoration of order, he slotted events into the comfortable narrative of right-wingers attacked innocent minorities. The point is that all acts of violence, intimidation, and vandalism should be treated equally, whether they're carried out by racist dunderheads or pro-Hamas thugs. We can't be taking sides in that. And we're seeing it on our own college campuses. People screaming death to the Jews. That is insane. And right here, they point out that if it wasn't for social media, his narrative, his approved narrative, would be the only thing that'd be heard, that the whole thing had to do with racism and Islamophobia. But yet, in the middle of the story, a broadcaster was threatened by a masked man shouting, "Free Palestine." The cameras cut away. The anchor did one of that. And they tried to cover it up because it didn't fit the narrative. Social media has exposed as much as it is exacerbated. And what it is exposed is not pretty. It's the fact that it's uneven. It's just simply uneven. But it's not right. I'm not condoning what they do. Far-right mob storms Rotherham Hotel, housing asylum seekers, and starts fire with people inside. I don't support that at all. I'm simply showing how that comes to be. Because in your interest to placate one group here, one group here, one group here, you're leaving out a lot of groups down here who now feel like they have been marginalized. You say that marginalizing a group is bad, but then you yourself turn around and marginalize other groups. Christians and Jews are bad, Muslims are great. But when we see that they're not great, we can't say anything about it. The news isn't going to say anything about it. Yeah, that's great. And these are the same people. This is from Just the News. Influential media groups are encouraging climate reporters to ignore dissenting voices. See, that's their whole thing right now is they're trying to say that climate change and the extreme heat is what's causing murder rates to go up. And this is coming from people who have an audience of, they say, 2 billion people. And they're being funded by anti-fossil fuel activists. And they encourage reporters to insert climate change into every topic. But they ignore whatever's not on their side, what doesn't fit their narrative. So here you go. This is from Tim Stewart. Virtually every journalism student is indoctrinated in college to have a moral responsibility to be a watchdog and a voice for the voiceless. This is a huge cultural shift from prior generations where journalists were trained to report objectively. Objectively. Include both sides. Write the story and let the readers decide for themselves. Therein lies the problem with our modern media. They're trying to decide for you. The Democrats decided for you who your candidate was going to be. That's not good. I wouldn't want it on my side. I would never allow it in purple. Because that's just stupid. I try to get both sides. I try to figure this out. Last week, and even today, people are up in arms how this man won the female boxing match. And I was one of the few people who was like, no, not really, but maybe, maybe it's a little, she has an advantage, but she was born that way. Not much you could do about that. I don't bellyache about it. But anyhow, at the end of all this, they mentioned that, like, Phoenix, one of the hottest cities in the U.S., showed a negative correlation between heat and gun violence. But you ignored that. You ignore that. Right there, their own numbers You know, the shootings that went up because of climate change went up nearly 16% in Minneapolis, but only 5% in Albuquerque. And Albuquerque is 10 degrees warmer. But this is a narrative. They don't have facts to back it up. Taylor Swift number 2 here. Taylor Swift jet launches retaliatory strike on ISIS stronghold. They arrested 2 guys. They had explosives. They had lots of guns, lots of ammunition, and their plan was to attack a Taylor Swift concert. Yesterday, Friday, they arrested a 3rd. One of them was a security guard at the concert. So this had a very good chance of being pulled off. The terrorists learned on October 7th that if you attack young women, you get a much bigger response than just randomly attacking people. You know, you get a little of that. I don't even want to discuss it. But they went after a Taylor Swift concert. They went after a Taylor Swift themed class. They know where the women are. These are calculating moves. And here in the United States, I feel like our government is all about the senators, the representatives, the president, the vice president. All these people are concerned with getting reelected. They're concerned with moving their agenda. They are concerned with looking good for these individual groups that they're trying to, strain votes out of. They're not paying attention to the real things. Tulsi Gabbard's on a no-fly list. That's really not focusing your attention, folks. It's not. Walz's state. Cities are burning down, and he's putting tampon dispensers in boys' bathrooms. They're not focused on the right things. The border is a prime example of that. It's open, folks. Right now, I'm really afraid that if Blue pulls this off, it may be the end of Blue. And the reason why I'm afraid of that is because for people to finally break the shackles of the two-party system in any time soon, like a quick timeline or time frame, it's going to take something very catastrophic or a bunch of medium catastrophes. And I think a lot of people are going to die. And that's really what I'm worried about. I see into the future, not like a clairvoyant or some shit like that, but you extrapolate. In chess, when you make a move, they're going to make a move. And what are you going to do then? If they make this move, what are you going to do? If they make this move, what are you going to do? So you look ahead. And what I see right now is the possibility of America, California, still a lot of Europe, being run by these agenda-first people who are so busy constructing and covering up and supporting their narrative that they're not going to pay attention to what the common American citizen needs. And what we need is we don't need our streets overrun with drugs and criminals and crazy homeless people. But instead of focusing on that, instead of spending money on that, you're going to spend all this money on fucking windmills? You're going full fucking Don Quixote. Look it up. It's a great reference. I'm Kid Copious. Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another. Vote with your head, not your heart. And always remember, dance it out.